babysat for a neighbor when I was 17 years old. She was a single mother going through a very difficult divorce. She was a mother of 2 small boys. The eldest was 8 years old, and the youngest was about 18 months old. Their sweetness and good behavior belied the hardships they were enduring. The older child in particular had symptoms of anxiety as a result. It broke my heart when he asked me why his dad couldn't live with them anymore. It's something I'll never forget. I refrained from answering him not because I lacked the necessary information, but because the thought of hearing it would have been unbearable for anyone. So, she hopped back on the dating bandwagon after a few months of solitude. She deserved to find happiness again, to find someone with the resources to be a true father to these 2 charming little boys, and I was elated for her after all she had been through. So, one evening, she goes on a date and promises to return shortly after midnight, but she never specifies where she's going, and I can't get in touch with her since we're talking about the 1980s when cell phones weren't widely available. Back then, everyone used landlines, so technically they did exist, just not in the commercial sense. The outcome may have been different if such had been the case. On that particular night, I'm lying on a couch, mindlessly changing the station. I tucked the kids into bed in their pajamas. They were sound asleep, and everything appeared to be going swimmingly until, out of nowhere, someone was pounding on the door. Even though I wasn't expecting anyone, I felt compelled to respond and take a message, because it wasn't my house. But then, as I made my way down the hall to the front door, the person on the other side began pounding on it and yelling obscenities. "Cheryl, I know you're in there, open the door now." It was extremely really nasty. I don't remember the exact words used, but I don't want to repeat them. The eldest son sprinted down the stairs from his room, exclaiming, "Daddy's home," as he raced to the door, leaving me paralyzed with fear. I snatch him up and drag him away from the door since I had no clue about his motives, and because, come on, there was definitely a good reason for their divorce. However the words, "I got my shotgun in my truck, and tonight I'm gonna teach you a lesson you'll never forget," made me vomit from horror. Even though he yells it, I can still make out the sound of his feet as they ascend the gravel path. After he returns, he starts pounding on the door and threatens to fire through it if no one opens it, as if he wasn't bluffing at all, in which case, her lives were obviously in jeopardy. After grabbing the kids, I bolted out the back door and hurried across the street to my house, where my mum promptly contacted the authorities. Just minutes after Cheryl called the police, they discovered her ex-husband defecating on her porch. I stayed at my place with the kids when their mum showed there. He was detained. My normally quiet mother was among the many who had broken down into tears by that point. There may not have been any actual threat. Perhaps he was merely experiencing a manic episode. On the other hand, I can honestly say that night was among the most horrifying of my life. This all happened when I was around 10 or 11. It was my final year of primary school, and I remember being really thrilled about moving to big school, as my parents put it. They were going to a work function, and I needed a babysitter. I recall them being concerned that they wouldn't be able to attend since they had left it too late to hire a sitter. I didn't want to be left alone with strangers, so I was devastated when they said they found someone to stay for a few hours on a Saturday evening. But when the time came and the babysitter arrived, I recall thinking it wouldn't be too bad. Sarah, a university student, was incredibly attractive and appeared to be truly nice. I can't remember exactly, but she quickly won over my folks. And well, because they liked her so much, I liked her too. She promised we'd have a little slumber party and watch my favorite movie, and my parents sweetened the deal by offering to leave us money for pizza. So I perked up for a moment as they showed the girl around the house, and actually warmed up to the concept. As they left the house, Sarah, who will just name her for the sake of the narrative, began to order us pizza. Only then did things start to become odd. She asked what my favorite topping was, and when I told her I preferred pepperoni, which is still my fave, she laughed and informed me she was a vegetarian. I told her we could always have 2 smaller pizzas, but she ignored me and ordered a huge spicy veggie pizza. I disliked spice and still do. Even as an adult, I can't stand chilies, so the younger me was devastated to learn that I had been largely excluded from the pizza party that we were meant to host. Everything went downhill from there. A few minutes after she called, there was a knock on the door, and I suspected it was the delivery guy. But it wasn't. From the top of the stairs, I witnessed a young man dressed in his own clothes emerge from the cold and enter our hallway. I wasn't sure what was going on or where the pizza was. But when they started sharing this terrible, wet kiss, I realized it was obviously her lover or something. And this is all after my parents made it obvious to her that she was not permitted to have any company around. So at this time, I was quite angry, almost enraged. So I snuck down into the kitchen to find the house phone and contact my mother. However, it was not in the charger. I looked about for a little while, attempting to find the item, when I realized there was a high probability the babysitter had it with her. I proceeded down the hall to the living room where she and her partner were, opened the door, and nearly recoiled at what I saw. They were doing something right there on the couch. Sarah yelled at me to leave and shut the door, and I answered by asking for the phone. She did not even acknowledge my request. She stood up from the couch, furious in her eyes, and slammed the door on me before screaming through the woods to return to my chamber and remain silent. I told her I was hungry, but there was no response. So I walked back up to my room and cried my eyes out. So it's vital to understand that this happened in the mid-1990s. Back then, the internet and cell phones were not readily available or cheap for a family like mine. If this had happened today, it would have been as simple as calling my parents or, say, taking a photo of the boyfriend being present, and that would be it. I just did not have those options available to me. Even if I had, this girl was so cunning that she would have figured a way around it. But that type of mistreatment did not frighten me. Yes, it was unpleasant, but another threat became more pressing when I learned they had locked the family dog inside the living room with them. I returned downstairs, confronting my concerns, and hoped to at least get Jazz out of the room with them. She was an Australian Shepherd, one of those dogs that is both shaggy and looks like someone splashed paint on them. I loved her so deeply that I had to save her. So I knocked on the living room door, only to be told to go away. I knocked again, telling the babysitter that Jazz needed to go outside to pee or be taken on a walk so she could do number 2. She shouted at me again, telling me to go. I wasn't going to allow this happen to my best friend in the world. So I pushed the door open just in time to see the guy do something truly extraordinary. So, in England, do we play cricket? And the balls are quite hard. I believe they are even harder than baseball, as you Americans play with thick cork on the inside and tough leather binding. People have died after being hit on the head with cricket balls. Jazz loved her cricket ball. We tried throwing tennis balls and other things at her, but I believe she preferred the leather smell that the cricket ball gave off. Maybe it reminded her of pursuing an animal or something. I'm not sure. But in any case, I opened the living room door to find the sitter's boyfriend lashing the cricket ball at Jazz so hard that when it hit her back leg, she yelped in a high pitch. I tried to rush in to save her, to drag her into my room where she might be secure, but the boyfriend was quick. He shoved me back into the hallway, locked the door, and I'm sure he placed something against it so they couldn't open it at all. From then on, I retreated to my room and wept myself to sleep, only to wake up to hear my parents talking to the sitter when they returned home. I didn't say anything since I was so terrified. For some reason, I was convinced that the boyfriend would harm them. I'm not sure. Kids are like that, I suppose. But of course, he was not present. He left before my parents got home. I believe the real fear was that the sitter had truly constructed some pure sob story about how I'd been really nasty and poorly behaved all evening, how I'd been a brat and wanted this, that, and the other. And they made a tremendous, horrible mistake, the complete idiots, because that cricket ball had left a huge welt on Jazz's hind leg. And when my father saw that I had at least partially spoken the truth about what they had been up to, you should have seen how furious he was. I won't bother you with the minor details, but let's just say that the sitter and her boyfriend were arrested for animal cruelty charges. And I know he was convicted and penalized for it. So, I suppose there is a silver lining to a pretty bad night. But be careful who you hire to watch your children.